Welcome back to 6-Minute Math, where we turn confusion into clarity 6 minutes at a time. Thank you for joining us today for our video on multiplying integers visually. Ring that bell to be notified of any more 6-minute content coming your way. And 6 minutes goes by quickly, so here we go. Our key points for multiplying integers visually is that using visuals for multiplying integers can be helpful to learn the process. This process involves our first sign is going to add or remove the number of groups of the second number. For our integer chips, remember that yellow is positive and red is negative. For that key point, if I were to have positive 5 times negative 6, I could look at that like I am adding 5 groups of negative 6 chips. If I were to have negative 3 times positive 8, I could look at that one as removing 3 groups of positive 8. This first sign in our evaluation process will tell us whether we are adding or removing. So let's look at some examples. We're going to evaluate the following expression, positive 4 times positive 7. And I can look at this like I am adding 4 groups of positive 7 chips. So I have my 4 groups of 7 chips. And if I were to take away those groupings, how many do I have left? If I were to count those up, I would have 28 positive chips. Let's look at another example. We have positive 6 times negative 3. So this would be like I was adding 6 groups of negative 3. So let's add those 6 groups of negative 3 chips. We have our groups here in columns. And then if I were to get rid of those groupings, I can just add up the amount of negative chips there, which tells me that positive 6 times negative 3 is equal to negative 18 chips. How about if I were to evaluate negative 5 times positive 3? This is the same as removing 5 groups of positive 3 chips. Now, how do you remove groups that don't exist? Well, we are going to introduce zero pairs. These are a combination of a positive and negative chip together, which is 0. So while it looks like there's a lot on the screen right now, this is actually the number 0. And I'm going to remove 5 groups of positive 3 chips. So I'm going to group my positive chips into 5 groups of 3, and I am going to remove those. And what do I have remaining? If I were to count these up, it will tell me that negative 5 times positive 3 results in negative 15 integer chips remaining. Let's evaluate negative 3 minus negative 6. So in this case, I am removing those 3 groups of negative 6, and I'm going to use my 0 pairs again. I'm going to group my negative integer chips into 3 groups of negative 6. And I'm going to remove them from my picture. What does that remain? Well, negative 3 times negative 6 equals positive 18 chips remaining. Couple more examples here. We're going to evaluate positive 4 times negative 8, which is the same as adding 4 groups of negative 8 chips. So I have my 4 groups of negative 8 chips. I get rid of my groupings, and I know that positive 4 times negative 8 is equal to negative 32. How about negative 7 times positive 2? We are going to remove those 7 groups of positive 2 chips, and I'm going to have my 0 pairs. I'm going to have 7 groups of positive 2, and I'm going to remove them from my pitcher. I'm going to count up my remaining chips, which tells me that negative 7 times positive 2 is negative 14. On to our last example here. We're going to evaluate negative 4 times negative 5, which is the same as removing 4 groups of negative 5 chips. So let's have our 0 pairs. Let's group our negative chips into 4 groups of 5, and let's remove them from my pitcher, resulting in negative 4 times negative 5 is positive 20 chips. Those are all the examples we have today for multiplying integers visually. Follow us on Instagram and TikTok at 6 Minute Math, and be sure to like, share, subscribe, and leave a comment below for any topic you want to see me tackle in a future 6-minute episode. Always remember that the best way to get math is to practice math, so keep on practicing. And until next time, keep solving and evolving.